Welcome back. Matchman Steve Ringer is with me today, and we've just looked at the World Championship conditions, and you brought in what you consider to be a heavy float for a UK river.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'd call that's quite a big flat float for some of the rivers I've fished here in England.
4 grams, which is three swan shot.
Yeah.
2.5 swan shot, really, which is a lot of shot for a float that holds back.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm thinking of somewhere like the Nene at Bluebell Bridge when it's in flood. And, yeah.
I did a feature with it on the Nen and struggled to get it.
Nen.
Nen. It was too big.
Yeah.
You know? So obviously what they've just been using in Croatia.
Right, well, let's just... there you go. That's what they were using in Croatia. And I remember, you know, when Wolfgang Kremkes won in 1980, I said he'd won with a float that looked like a ping-pong ball with a lolly stick stuck through it. That was 5 grams, and I went up to 10 grams. This is like a ping-pong bat.
It's like a tennis ball.
With a lolly stick stuck through it, yeah. And I mean, if you look at the weights there, there's 2 different... These are Will Raisin's actual floats. I went to Gold and picked some off him yesterday. But that is a trotting through rig with those shot spread out. So that would be run through the swim slightly faster than this one. And you can see on this one, there's much heavier ball weights, they're drill bullets, and less down here. That's for trying to hold back and fishing closer to the bottom slower. But, I mean, that's just phenomenal. Imagine that under a pole, the elastic, the way you've got to tension the elastic.
The thing is, when you get a bite, you've got to strike through that to get to the fish.
Yeah, amazing. OK. And now, Anna's been kind to you in the past couple of months. You've not done bad over there at all. First of all, at the end of July, it was a senior success at the official World Feeder Fishing Championships, both for Team England and individually. Double gold medal. How was it like for you there? Did you know, what a feeling that must have been?
Best feeling, other than like my little boy being born, it's the best feeling I could ever imagine. I've always wanted, as I said earlier, that 1 gold, and then for both to come along at the same time.
It's a good job that team can fish as well, because you'd never take that, would you? You know, let's be fair.
I think we're struggling with the word.
And you got one or two of the rigs that you use. I mean, first of all, this is a mock-up of the rig you used.
Yeah, basically the rules of the World Feeder Championship, it has to be free running. Yeah. So what I've got is a twisted loop that acts as a stiff boom. And then I've just made some little links myself. It was an idea that Dean Barlow came up with.
They're tiny little links, aren't they?
Yeah, just nice and neat, don't tangle, but the rig has to be free running. So from a fish welfare point of view, if you crack off or you get stuck in a snag and the line breaks, the fish isn't left towing around a feeder.
So that's actually crimped through like a little jewellery bead?
Yeah, it is. The beads are from Hobbycraft.
Wow.
So it's little tiny craft bead, and it's 25 pound fluorocarbon, so it acts really stiff.
Yeah, this link here.
Yeah, and then it's just a snap link swivel, again crimped. Really neat, and just like I even use that now for my normal fishing.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. It's that neat, doesn't tangle.
Perfect. Not going to catch any weed if you're on a river.
The other thing is I've been fishing Ferry Meadows for big bream lately.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of weed close in. The good thing about that, because it's running, when the feeder gets stuck in the weed, you still attack.
It soon pulls free.
Yeah. Whereas with a fixed rig, when the feeder gets stuck, bream nods its head and the hook pulls out.
Yeah. You brought in a wide variety of feeders here. I mean, they're basically all different sizes, obviously, but even when you've got the same sizes, you've got different weights. Yeah. Now, when you're fishing, you know, most people think a feeder, put the weight on to hold the bottom in the middle of the river. Yeah. Why would you use different weights on still waters?
A lot of it was for speed. You know, what we found in Ireland was our general size was 28 gram. Just to start,
that's an ounce.
Yeah, to start the session and build it up. But when you got a lot of fish in your swim, you needed to catch quick. So what we do then is switch to 44. You know, I mean, what we found was 44 gram would virtually double. You'd be fishing twice as quick. So instead of waiting maybe 8-9 seconds for the feeder to hit, you're only waiting 4. So you're down quicker, and also all your bites tend to come. By the time you've tightened properly onto it, if you've not had a bite, you have to wind it in. So with a 44, you're on it instantly. Yeah. And your bites were magnified, and it's really quick. The only downside, and what we found to a big feeder is, when they're there, it's fantastic. One a chuck, you know what I mean? Like catching 1 a minute. Yeah. But then once they get a bit spooky, crashing a 44 grammer on their heads isn't good. So as soon as it started to slow, go back to the 28, build the swim up again, and as soon as you got the fish there, back to the big feeder, make hay while the sun shines.
How tricky is it to use the right tip in your rod? Because there's a lot of resistance on that feeder, and when it's bouncing up and down on the line with a fish what is the rule in the World Championship?
50 centimetres.
So with a fish 50 centimetres below it, that gives that fish a lot of leeway to get off. Obviously, you don't use barbless hooks.
No, we're using
by choice.
Big hooks. You know, we use size 10s with us, which a lot of people find out size 10s and a single maggot, which in England no one would ever do.
Oh, that's what we used to use those for dace on the Thames, mate, when block end feeders first came out.
But in Ireland, it's the done thing. We use like red hooks as well, and like in practice, we actually caught fish just on the bare hooks.
Amazing. Now, last week you were in Ireland again, fishing the World Pairs Championships, and that wasn't bad for you either. You fished with your brother Phil, and of course Phil's also part of that England feeder team, and you joined forces to finish runners-up to another of your feeder teammates, Adam Wakelin, who took the honours with his partner Rob Wootton, also in the World Fair. What a period Rob Wootton's having, also in the feeder team.
UK champion as well.
And look at that. Adam also did the business in the individual stakes competition for the Diver Cup, worth a pretty penny too. He amassed nearly 14 kilos more than you, Steve. Was he on the feeder as well?
He caught feeder actually every day, but after Wednesday, Rob and Adam they'd already won the pairs, to be honest. So myself and Phil, we sat down Wednesday night and said, forget about trying to catch them. Let's make sure we finish second, and fortunately we did.
Now, you fished the float, I know a lot on that. Did you fish float every day on the World Pairs?
4.5 days I fished the pole, basically. One day I had on the window, one half match, I fished a window feeder for roach.
Now, these are interesting because I remember, a few years now, Bob Nudd came in and showed us his original that he cut out himself for these from the old carp feeder. And now they've been developed a stage further. And, I mean, that's what you'd buy in the shop, this one on the right here. And this one, you've extended the window, made the window bigger. Yeah,
it makes them quicker to load, and also it gives a better release. The other thing with them, they cast, because they're nose heavy, but you can cast them, even in a big wind, you can cast them miles. But when you're playing a fish, when you're reeling in, catching a roach, say 2 to 4 ounce every cast, they're so quick, because they're streamlined. With a cage feeder, they're giving you resistance. With that, you can just keep winding and swinging them in. It just speeds everything up.
The other thing is as well, that'd sit on the bottom like that, so when you're winding, that's naturally going to come up rather than come along, so you're less likely to
there's a lot of ledges in Ireland and stuff, so you don't want something that digs in.
And you know, you said you fished on the float, and that's a 3 gram
that's the biggest.
Which would be quite big.
That's the biggest I use. Most of the days I was fishing with 4.16s, 4.18s.
Really? As light as that?
The venues were like 4 to 6 foot in the main. But the key was every bite came on the drop. So basically you had to lay your rig out, hold it dead tight, almost as if you were like hemp fishing.
Oh, I know.
Hold it dead tight, and just in that last
Don't give away the secrets of hemp fishing, please, mate.
Just in that last 2 foot, it goes. Once the float is settled, basically you need to whip it out. And the other thing, you have to fish a really long line, because a lot of you'd feed, say, 11 metres or 13, but catch most of your fish at 14 by flicking past it. They just, because the water's clear in Ireland, they just sit off the back.
That's the zebra mussels, of course, they've done that. It always used to be quite coloured, didn't it, the Irish lakes. Now you've got the zebra mussels and everything, it's cleared around. How did you feed on that World Pairs Championship, generally? In that shallow water, was it a few balls at the start and then feed out loose feed?
I potted everything and then loose fed over the top. The reason I potted is because there's a lot of pike in Ireland, and I've got a bit of a theory that if you ball it, the noise of balling it attracts pike. Whether it does, that's all. So most of the time I was potting in 4 balls, but making them really soft. Loads of really finely chopped worms, so there's a lot of attraction there. Then just loose feed, probably feeding 4 pints of casters in 5 hours. Then sort of every 45 minutes, it just started to slow. So you put a really soft ball of ground bait in, quite dark colour, with not loads of food in the mix, with loads of chopped worm, and they just come straight back to it.
I think you want it to be dark there, because what colour there is in the water is like a peaty hue, isn't it? It's that almost like dark whiskey colour. Or bitter beer. It's the colour of bitter beer.
It's surprising, though, because even with a dark mix, when you throw it in, it doesn't blend in with the bottom like you think it does. It looks really dark in your bucket and everything, but if you throw a bit in the margins, it doesn't blend in.
It goes white very quickly, doesn't it? It must have been great for you as well, fishing with Phil in that at World Pairs, and to nearly win it. You know?
Yeah, we were second last year, second this year. You know, sometimes I think there's a good second, and this year was a good second. We couldn't have won in hindsight, so second was as good as we could achieve.
And then the World Feeder team as well, to have him there when you won gold.
Fantastic. Phil was obviously he loves feeder fishing, so the feeder team was tailor-made for him.
He likes the old pipe and slippers, as we call it.
He does,
Welcome back. Now autumn is a reality, and Jack Frost can't be far away, but he's certainly not arriving this weekend. In fact, it's going to be warm on Saturday, with temperatures in the low 20s in the south and high teens further north. There'll be the occasional shower in the west, and it's not going to be excessively sunny, with the cloud we've had for most of the week remaining with us. It'll be slightly cooler on Sunday, but dry and pleasant. We'll still have that easterly airstream that has driven me mad. The old adage, when the wind's in the east, the fish bite least, certainly has some foundation. To be honest, though, the fishing hasn't been too bad, mostly because temperatures are kept up, but on some venues, oxygen levels could become an issue. That's not the case in the sea, though for shore anglers, a couple of hours spent after dark can be more productive, with whiting feeding close in, with the added benefit of soles from the eastern end of the English Channel right round to the Wash. Small hooks and lugworm baits tipped with morsels of mackerel or squid on 2-hook flapper rigs is the way to go. On the western side, there's more whiting, with a chance of codling and bass, and conger and huss from rock marks, so squid and mackerel on more substantial gear for those. Don't forget, it's close to prime time for catching squid now, and if you're into eating squid, the fresh home-caught variety is literally chalk and cheese compared to the frozen stuff. That's best saved for bait. Fishing squid jigs, I can tell you, is great fun. Going afloat, there's still some pollock and conger from wreck and reef marks, and no bother catching mackerel for bait. Now, as far as fly fishing is concerned, with light easterlies continuing, the bigger reservoirs are not going to be easy, but there will be some big fish to be had. Continue on the fry patterns, including floating fry, and target weed beds that are dying back. If you can find them in the shade, so much better, and east banks would be where to look. Fish floating fry with just the occasional twitch make them skip just a little bit to mimic a disabled small fish. The other pattern to fish, again on the lee bank, is daddies. Even in this long dry spell, there are big hatches and they make a decent mouthful for a hungry trout. On smaller waters, dry or sunk daddies will be my go-to pattern currently, with tadpoles, especially olive taddies, the pick. I was at a small water yesterday with Pete Cockwell practising my casting, and there were lots of cruising and fish not feeding, so they've got to be stimulated. And Steve, I asked you to bring in a couple of your flies, and I'm going to show these graphically, if I can, because what you've brought in is, I suppose, is that a suspender minke or suspender zonky?
Suspender minke.
And a raggedy old gold-ribbed hares in.
Yeah.
Now, how would you fish those?
Well, what I used to find this time of year was best time to get up really early in the morning. I used to fish Pitsford a lot. Get up at 5, so you're there as soon as first light. Just fish them around the weed beds. And just really slow figure of 8, but every now and again, just give them a bit of a violent twitch just to make that sort of minke explode on the surface.
Pop,
yeah, what you tend to find is a lot of fish will hit the minke, but they very rarely get hooked on it. But then they'll surge past the minke and take the hares.
Yeah, good stuff. And because you won a medal at fly fishing, haven't you?
Yeah, I fished the home internationals and captained England in Scotland as well.
See? A man of many talents. And now, river course fishing isn't its best thanks to low flow and clear water. There's some decent hemp fishing to be had for roach and still barbel and chub on the faster sections, but really, you have to find and fish in the flow. Try rolling meat on shallower sections or meat on the feed with hemp and small pellets. That's working well. Barbel and chub seem to prefer a bait on the bottom to chasing things under a waggler at the moment, but pole is the method for roach, again over ground bait, even when using hemp. This is definitely the year of the crumb as far as river roach are concerned. Still waters are suffering in the same way as rivers being low and clear. That makes fishing more difficult, especially during daylight. You'll either need to find some cover, such as dying weed or overhanging trees, or where what wind there is blows onto the bank. Otherwise, fish the widest part of the lake. Carp anglers need to remember the 3 most important factors: location, location, and, yes, you've got it, location. The best bait and super rigs won't catch fish that are not there. I'd stick to smaller food parcels, such as single hook baits with a few scattered, or small PVA sticks of crumbed boilie and small pellets. On the commercial scene, there's some good fishing to be had, but with the man sitting here, let's find out what he suggests. And what do you reckon, Steve? You're going to commercial this weekend. What would you do?
You know, I always think this time of year, fish are coming out of summer, they've had a gut full of pellets. It's what I call meat month.
Meat month?
You know what I mean? They just love it. They're getting ready for winter. They're looking to put a bit of weight on, really go on the feed, and they just love meat this time of year.
Now, you're going to Whiteacre soon, I think, aren't you? And what will you be doing down there?
A lot of pole. There won't be much method fishing. What tends to happen this time of year, the fish will come away from the shallow water against the islands. They'll come into the deeper water, but they're looking to feed. But rather than pellets, which they've seen probably every day for 4 or 5 months, they like a change, and meat just fits in perfectly.
What do you do? I mean, I've got one of those meat cutters. I know people have several. I've just got one 6mm because that seems the right size for me. But I will sometimes cut chunks of bigger meat, and I try polony sometimes as well because that's a little bit tougher, got a firmer texture, and that's I find that brilliant hair rigging. What do you do?
I just have one cutter as well. It doesn't make sense, but it's a big 6mm.
Oh, yeah.
So it's probably about 7mm.
Mine's a small 6mm, yeah.
It's probably about 7mm, but I find that perfect. I catch big skimmers with it, big roach, but also the carp, which I'm after. But what it gives me is like the way the cutter's made, it gives me a double cube on the end.
Oh,
so like in amongst my standard 6 mils, I also have some bigger hook baits. So every now and again, just put a bigger hook bait on, and often it will nick you a quick bite.
Now, do you hook that or do you hair rig it?
If I'm fishing on the bottom with a pole, say, then I'll just hook it on. But if I was fishing shallow, then I'll just pull a bait band through it for hair rigging. I think when you're fishing shallow, you want the whole hook showing, whereas when you're on the bottom, you're lifting and pulling the hook through the meat.
Yeah. Do you fish? Do you ever try polony, or do you do anything to harden your hook bait meat, or do you want it soft?
I want it really soft. I keep it. What I do is when I get to my peg, just put a bit of water on it, and then just keep recirculating it, so it's not soaked. I don't want it like some people have it swimming in the boat.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed before a couple of times, because I used to keep some meat behind me ready to bring forward, so you've always got some fresh. But I could catch on the meat that had been in the water a little while and was damp. You get some fresh out, it can't get a bite, and I'm sure it's because it's not as soft, doesn't look the same. And I think once it's been in water a little while, it changes colour.
Yes, it does.
And it goes a little bit more white.
Yeah.
And I think on pressured fisheries, the fish wise up to the fact that's a fresh cube, that one's been in the water a little while, it's going to be safer.
You give them a lot of credibility, mate. I think, like, my wife's got a pony, and when it walks past something that's just arrived, it's like that. But if it's been there for a while, it's not so bothered about it. And I think fish are the same. When you get a fish has swum past bait a couple of times, it's part of the furniture. Oh, I'll eat that now. And you bought in, I mean, I remember dear old Cookie's infamous jigger rig that he was going to empty a Cubmore with on Fishermania. It didn't work. But you like the rig?
I think it's brilliant. You know, I mean, it's one of them.
Let me just get hold of
Cookie was the one who first told me about it.
Really?
And like, I first of all was like, well, shallow fishing on the pole. It's designed for shallow fishing up in the water. But the great thing about it is, as you drop the pole,
just do that so you can sit,
the float goes up. So you fish loads of different depths. You know, you can have one rig and obviously fish from like 4 inch. You normally have a 4-inch hook length underneath the bulk, and you can fish right from 4 inches down to as long as your line is between pole tip and float. But the brilliant part is you never miss a bite because the line's running through the float. A fish sucks the hook bait in, and the elastic just comes out the pole.
Do you use when I fish shallower? I use a lighter elastic and I fish deep. Do you do that as well?
Yeah, I'd drop down to like a light hollow. You know, I mean, I use heavier elastics on the bottom, light elastics for shallow. I just find that works better. But the beauty of that is literally, you don't have to watch the float as such. You just jig in, as the name suggests, moving the pole up and down. All of a sudden, the elastic just streams out.
Do you know, you think of carp self-hooking. I remember going back to probably the very early 1990s. Gary Jubb used to fish for Goldthorpe. Yeah. Very, very good roach angler. He developed a rig, basically, for roach fishing. Yeah. Where he had a couple of number eights between, with a poly ball floating between.
Yeah.
And he used to empty places with roach, because shallow fishing for roach, especially with casters, you miss so many bites, and every time you miss a bite, your caster's done. You've got to put it on again, and it's slow. But he developed that, and he was devastating.
Yeah, the beauty of it, there's no resistance, because all the float is there is really to keep your line in position. So as it's going up and down, the fish feels the hook bait, and your line's always tight, so it just hooks itself against the elastic.
So what's the Whiteacres Festival then? Is it you got the?
I've got 2 coming up. I'm off for the Maver and then Preston, which leads on to the big £25,000 Part Dean final.
Oh yeah, so you're putting your commercial fishery hat back on and getting the bank account primed, ready to take a couple of big checks.
It'd be nice. I think I've been in the last 5 finals and not even had a sniff, so it'd be nice.
It is a very tough place to qualify though, but there's a few of you down there that seem to have it a bit more sussed.
Yeah, Des is probably the most consistent, and obviously he's won a couple of finals as well, so I always think he's the man to beat down there, but I've done all right. Yes. He's done all right. Time's run out on us for another week. Remember, keep in touch via Twitter and the website. There's loads of great features on there. And please keep any questions you've got and young angler photos coming in on that same email. Thanks for coming in, Steve. It's been great to see you, mate. I really enjoyed it. Now, next Friday, my guest will be specialist Jamie Cartwright, one of the UK's top big fish anglers and the current Drennan Cup champion. Join us at 6 p.m. on Sky Sports 2. That's next week with specialist angler Jamie Cartwright, 6 o'clock on Sky Sports 2. Don't forget, the shows and other features are also available on demand in the Sky Sports section of Catch Up. So have a superb week wherever you're fishing, and tight lines. And our congratulations to the Dutch, the 2014 World Champions. Cheers, mate.
Enjoy Sky Sports Live on all screens, on the go, and the best bits on demand.